They were the ghosts of the Rockies, men who could survive for years without seeing another human soul. But in 1861, thousands of seasoned trappers suddenly abandoned the high peaks for a secret war. Why did the world's most rugged loners trade their beaver pelts for the disciplined violence of clandestine battalions? Chapter 1. The End of the Trapping Era. The American West in the early decades of the 19th century was a vast, untamed expanse, a canvas upon which a unique breed of men etched their existence. These were the mountain men, figures of legend and solitude, whose lives were inextricably linked to the rhythm of the wilderness and the pursuit of beaver pelts. Their world was one of raw survival, where skill, resilience, and an intimate understanding of the land were paramount. They navigated treacherous mountain passes, endured brutal winters, and faced down dangerous wildlife, all for the promise of a lucrative fur trade. However, by the mid-1800s, the very foundation of their existence began to crumble, leading to a profound shift in their way of life and ultimately their destiny. The diminishing returns in the fur trade marked the beginning of the end for this era. The peak of the Rocky Mountain fur trade, a period of intense activity and profit, spanned a mere 2 decades, from 1820 to 1842. During this time, the demand for beaver pelts, primarily for the fashionable beaver, felt hats in Europe and America, fueled a relentless pursuit that led to severe overharvesting. The seemingly endless supply of beaver in the pristine mountain streams was, in reality, finite. As trappers pushed deeper into the wilderness, the beaver populations dwindled, making the once bountiful trapping grounds increasingly barren. The economic viability of their solitary profession began to erode, forcing many to confront a future devoid of the familiar rhythm of the trapline. Compounding the ecological crisis was a dramatic collapse of the beaver market. Fashion, ever fickle, turned its gaze away from beaver, fell to the sleek elegance of silk hats, too. This shift in sartorial preference delivered a fatal blow to an industry already on its knees. The demand for beaver pelts plummeted, and with it, the prices that had once sustained the mountain men. Their hard-won furs, once a valuable commodity, became nearly worthless. The economic incentive that had drawn them to the remote corners of the continent vanished, leaving them adrift in a changing world. The psychological toll of extreme isolation was a constant companion for these solitary figures. For years, many mountain men lived without seeing another human soul, their only companions the vast silence of the mountains and the wild creatures that shared their domain. While some embraced this solitude, it was not without its burdens. The absence of human connection, the constant vigilance against danger, and the relentless struggle for survival could wear down even the most hardened spirit. As the fur trade waned, the prospect of continuing such an isolated existence, now without the promise of reward, became increasingly bleak. A growing desire for a collective cause, a sense of belonging, began to stir within these rugged individualists, a yearning for something beyond the solitary pursuit of pelts. This yearning coincided with a period of immense national upheaval. The shifting geopolitical landscape of 1861 was a seismic event that reverberated even in the most remote mountain outposts. The brewing conflict between the Union and the Confederacy, a struggle over the very soul of the nation, began to draw men from all walks of life into its vortex. While the mountain men were far removed from the political machinations of Washington, D.C. or Richmond, the echoes of war eventually reached them. The frontier, once a refuge from civilization, now offered little escape from the impending storm. The collapse of their traditional livelihood, coupled with the profound national crisis, created a vacuum that would soon be filled by a new, unexpected call to arms. Chapter 2. The Call of the Secret Battalions. As the Civil War erupted, both the Union and Confederate forces quickly recognized the need for specialized skills beyond traditional infantry tactics. The vast, often unforgiving terrain of the American continent, particularly the border states and mountainous regions, demanded a different kind of soldier, one intimately familiar with the wilderness, capable of independent action, and possessing an unparalleled understanding of tracking and survival. It was in this context that the clandestine recruitment efforts targeting mountain men began. These were not public calls to arms, but rather discreet overtures, often made by agents who understood the unique value these frontiersmen brought to the fight. The mountain men, with their decades of experience navigating the most challenging landscapes, were invaluable assets. Their ability to move silently, through dense forests, to read the subtle signs of the wilderness, and to endure extreme conditions made them ideal for reconnaissance, scouting, and irregular warfare. They possessed a topographical knowledge that no map could replicate, an intuitive understanding of the land that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The recruiters sought them out for their unparalleled skills, recognizing that these rugged individuals, though seemingly detached from society, held keys to strategic advantages. Strategic incentives were carefully crafted to entice these fiercely independent frontiersmen to trade their freedom for military service. For men whose livelihoods had vanished, the promise of regular pay, even if modest, was a powerful draw. Beyond monetary compensation, there was the allure of purpose, a chance to be part of something larger than themselves after years of solitary existence. For some, it was a continuation of their adventurous spirit, a new frontier to conquer, albeit one defined by conflict rather than commerce. For others, particularly those with strong Union or Confederate sympathies, it was a matter of principle, a call to defend their beliefs. The recruiters often highlighted the opportunity to utilize their unique skills in a meaningful way, appealing to their pride and expertise. These incentives were crucial in persuading men who had long valued their independence to accept the rigid hierarchy of military life. This marked a significant transition from the lawless high peaks to the rigid hierarchy of covert Union and Confederate units. The mountain man's life was one of self-reliance, where decisions were made independently and survival depended on personal judgment. Military life, in stark contrast, demanded obedience, discipline, and adherence to a chain of command. This was a profound culture shock for many. Yet their inherent adaptability, honed by years of surviving in unforgiving environments, allowed many to integrate into these specialized units. They became scouts, sharpshooters, and irregular cavalry, often operating in small, autonomous groups that mirrored their former lives, but now with a clear military objective. These units, often operating under the radar, were tasked with critical missions that leveraged the mountain men's unique capabilities, from deep reconnaissance to targeted strikes against enemy supply lines. Chapter 3. Masters of the Invisible Front. The integration of mountain men into Civil War battalions transformed the nature of warfare, particularly in the rugged and forested terrains where their skills shone brightest. These were not soldiers trained in parade ground drills, but rather masters of an invisible front, where stealth, observation, and precision were paramount. Their contributions were often unheralded, yet profoundly impactful, shaping engagements and influencing campaign outcomes in ways that traditional military histories rarely capture. One of their most critical contributions was the application of deep wilderness tracking techniques to locate hidden enemy troop movements. A mountain man could discern the subtle signs of passage, a broken twig, a displaced stone, a faint scent on the wind, and piece together a narrative of enemy activity. They understood the psychology of movement through difficult terrain, anticipating routes and identifying potential ambush points. This innate ability to read the landscape allowed them to act as the eyes and ears of their respective armies, providing intelligence that was often more accurate and timely than that gathered by conventional patrols. They could follow trails that were invisible to the untrained eye, determining the size, direction, and even the morale of enemy forces, giving their commanders a crucial advantage in planning and deployment. The long rifle, a tool synonymous with the mountain man, underwent a significant evolution from a hunting tool to a precision instrument of psychological warfare. For decades, these men had relied on their rifles for sustenance and self-defense, developing an unparalleled proficiency in marksmanship. When they joined the military, this skill was harnessed for a new purpose. Units like Berdan's Sharpshooters, formed in 1861, specifically sought out men who could demonstrate exceptional shooting abilities, requiring recruits to land 10 consecutive rifle shots within a 10-inch circle at 200 yards. While not all mountain men joined such elite units, their individual marksmanship was often superior to that of regular infantry. They became snipers, targeting officers, artillerymen, and key personnel, sowing fear and disruption within enemy ranks. The psychological impact of an unseen enemy capable of picking off targets from extreme distances was immense, forcing opponents to adopt new tactics and increasing their caution. Furthermore, their inherent understanding of the wilderness allowed for the development and application of survivalist camouflage and silent movement, which gave these units an asymmetric advantage on the battlefield. Unlike the brightly uniformed regular soldiers, mountain men often adopted practical, earth-toned clothing that blended seamlessly with their surroundings. Berdan's Sharpshooters, for instance, famously wore green uniforms, a stark contrast to the standard blue and gray, which served as effective camouflage in wooded and field environments. Their movements were fluid and quiet, a lifetime of stalking game translating into an uncanny ability to approach enemy positions undetected. They could melt into the landscape, observe, gather intelligence, and strike with devastating precision before vanishing as quickly as they appeared. This mastery of stealth and concealment allowed them to operate effectively on the outskirts of battles, influencing outcomes without engaging in direct, large-scale combat. They were, in essence, the original Special Forces, operating with a degree of autonomy and effectiveness that belied their often undocumented presence. Chapter 4. The Brutal Reality of Disciplined Violence. The transition from the untamed wilderness to the structured brutality of Civil War battlefields presented a profound challenge for the mountain men. Their lives had been defined by self-reliance and a direct, often personal struggle for survival. Now they were thrust into a conflict characterized by mass formations, rigid command structures, and an impersonal, industrialized form of violence. This was the brutal reality of disciplined violence, a stark contrast to the individualistic skirmishes of the frontier. The culture shock experienced by solitary trappers forced into the meat grinder of organized infantry combat was immense. Accustomed to making their own decisions, relying on their instincts, and operating with minimal oversight, they now found themselves subjected to strict military discipline, drills, and the often senseless orders of officers who might lack their practical experience. The sheer scale of the battles, with thousands of men clashing in chaotic, bloody encounters, was a far cry from the quiet vigilance of the trap line. The constant noise, the stench of gunpowder and death, and the sight of mass casualties must have been a jarring assault on their senses. While their skills in marksmanship and stealth were highly valued, the psychological adjustment to fighting as part of a larger, often anonymous machine was undoubtedly difficult. Many found themselves in roles that leveraged their unique abilities, such as scouting or sharpshooting, which allowed for a degree of independence. However, even in these roles, they were still bound by the overarching objectives and constraints of the military campaign. There are documented accounts of mountain men leading black flag operations that bypassed traditional rules of engagement. The term black flag in the context of the Civil War often referred to a policy of giving no quarter, a war without mercy. 3. While such operations were often associated with guerrilla warfare and irregular units, particularly in the border states and mountainous regions, the mountain men, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain and their capacity for ruthless efficiency, were uniquely suited for them. Their frontier experience had taught them that survival often depended on decisive, uncompromising action. When engaged in reconnaissance or special missions, they were known to operate with a ferocity that sometimes transcended the conventional norms of warfare. These were not always officially sanctioned policies, but rather the grim realities of a conflict that often devolved into personal vendettas and brutal reprisals. Their ability to move undetected and strike with lethal precision made them formidable adversaries in these types of engagements, often leaving little trace of their presence beyond the devastating impact of their actions. The lethality of seasoned scouts in pivotal but undocumented skirmishes that shaped major campaign outcomes cannot be overstated. While the grand narratives of the Civil War often focus on major battles and prominent generals, countless smaller engagements, skirmishes, and acts of individual bravery and skill played a crucial role in the overall trajectory of the war. Many of these encounters, particularly those involving small, specialized units or individual scouts, went largely undocumented in official reports. Yet it was often in these invisible battles that the mountain men made their most significant contributions. A well-placed shot from a sharpshooter could eliminate a key officer, disrupting enemy command and control. A scout's timely intelligence could prevent an ambush or reveal a critical flank, altering the course of a battle. Their ability to operate independently, to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances, and to inflict disproportionate damage on the enemy made them a force multiplier. These were the ghost soldiers whose impact was felt on the battlefield, but whose stories often remained untold, lost to the fog of war and the anonymity of their specialized roles. Chapter 5. Legacy of the Ghost Soldiers. The cannons fell silent, the armies disbanded, and the nation began the arduous process of reconstruction. For many soldiers, the return to civilian life was a return to familiarity. But for the mountain men who had traded their solitary existence for the disciplined violence of war, the transition was different. Their legacy, though often overlooked, profoundly shaped the post-war American landscape and left an indelible mark on military doctrine. The post-war disappearance of these specialized veterans back into the expanding western frontier was a natural, almost inevitable, progression. The West, with its vast untamed spaces, still held an allure for those who had spent their lives in its embrace. For many, the war had been an interlude, a temporary diversion from their true calling. With the fur trade largely defunct, they found new roles as guides for settlers, prospectors, and military expeditions, leveraging their unparalleled knowledge of the land. Others simply vanished into the wilderness, seeking the solitude and freedom they had always cherished. Their skills, honed by years of frontier life and refined by the crucible of war, made them invaluable assets in the continued westward expansion. They became the silent architects of trails, the uncredited protectors of wagon trains, and the anonymous explorers who charted the last remaining blank spaces on the map. Their return to the frontier ensured that their unique expertise continued to influence the development of the American West, even as their direct involvement in the Civil War faded from public memory. The modern military reconnaissance foundations that trace their DNA back to these 19th century mountain units are a testament to their enduring impact. The principles of stealth, independent operation, precision marksmanship, and deep wilderness tracking, which were the hallmarks of the mountain men's wartime contributions, became foundational elements of specialized military units in subsequent conflicts. The concept of sharpshooters operating as independent or semi-independent units to provide targeted fire and intelligence evolved into the modern sniper and reconnaissance roles. The emphasis on camouflage and silent movement, once a matter of personal survival for the trapper, became a critical component of special operations tactics. While the technology and scale of warfare have changed dramatically, the core tenets of effective reconnaissance and irregular warfare as practiced by these frontier soldiers remain relevant.